Hey, Newsa-Cast listeners, you can find every episode on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or YouTube. Please help us grow by subscribing or sharing the Newsa-Cast with friends, or follow us on Facebook, X, TikTok, or Instagram. Now, let's get this show on the road.
I knew I wanted to do something with my voice and something with sports. I would take the local newspaper, I'd open it up to the sports section and start reading the articles like I was on the radio. And if I would have to use the restroom or something, and we'll be back right after this. Use the restroom, I'd come back and open it back up. And we're back.
Welcome to the Newsa-Cast. What is a Newsa-Cast? It's where we bring local folk stories to life through conversation.
Hello, Newsa-Cast listeners, and welcome to another episode of this podcast. We're so excited that you're joining us again and continue to join us through what is now our 23rd episode. We continue to tell the stories of all the people that we meet and that we get the chance to interview. And we have another great interview this week, Joe.
We do, Tosh. We're doing the thing, Tosh. We're actually doing the thing. We're podcasters, Tosh, 23 times over.
Yeah, exactly. It's hard to believe, you know. And this week we get to listen to another personality, radio personality, in fact. Joey D, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Joey D, if you don't know the name, you'll know the name. You flip on WHBY, you'll hear him there. He's on the score, WSCO, quite often. He has been... I was shocked I knew this, but I had forgotten. We talked a lot about when he came to town back when the score first started 20 years ago, even before guys like Shane Sparks. And if some of you remember Jim Caston, Joey D was one of those original guys. So he's been in the area for a long time. And if you still don't recognize the name, anytime you go out to Fox City Stadium and you hear a batter announced, that's Joey D. He's also their PA announcer. So super excited to have him. And Tosh, you talk about, we're doing the podcast thing. And when you and I set out to do this, we wanted to tell these stories, and we're telling the stories. We had a great story with Sean Becker in the Aaron's Nordic Center last week, which was fantastic. We had Nick Salm the week before, and I had a chance to sit down and it was just shooting the breeze with Nick a little bit. And he said that his dad listened to the podcast, and for those of you on the north side of Appleton or involved in Appleton North, you certainly know who Papa Salm is. And I got a kick out of the story. Nick told me the story that in that interview, Nick talked about how he was, when he first started playing football, the position the coach put him at was guard. And Nick saw himself as a running back. He wasn't a guard. And he went and he told his dad that story in the barn as they were milking cows that night. And the awesome thing about the Newsa-Cast was they both remembered that story. Papa Salm remembered it. Nick remembered it. They remembered where they were in the barn, and they connected over that story that was told on the Newsa-Cast. And that made me really happy and really pleased. And it's kind of exactly what we're looking for with the Newsa-Cast. So that made me super excited. I was happy to hear that.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, when you think you have a moment that happens 30 some years ago, if not more, and you still sit down. I said, yeah, I completely remember that conversation.
Yes.
And it's exactly what I told you to do.
Yes.
As a father, yeah, that's an awesome memory.
Yeah.
But as a kid, it's like, home, you know what? Yeah, my parents were right. My parents do have some knowledge about things.
Absolutely. You mean your parents know what they're talking about sometimes?
Yeah,
come on.
It's amazing.
It really is.
It's amazing. And I want to get back to thinking about that as well. Is it's just that, I think sometimes we lose that fact too, that, this is why you talk to your grandparents. This is why you spend time with them and listen to their stories, is because a lot of the time it's really cool stuff that you're talking about. And when you have those memories years later, it's like, oh yeah, that was pretty awesome.
100%. I think a lot of it is age. I think you have to get older to appreciate it. I see it in my own kids. I think about this all the time. for the most part, they don't want a whole lot, they don't want to hang out with dad, so to speak. Or sometimes you'll catch them on a good moment. But then I look at myself back when I was their age, and I didn't really want a whole lot to do with my dad either at that age. But then, I don't know, a couple of years later, sometimes maybe when you kind of start getting into adulthood, you start maybe reconnecting with your parents a little bit more on a different level. And that's pretty cool as well. But yeah, you're right. When they're teenagers and that age, they want nothing to do with their parents unless they need money.
Exactly. Absolutely. Money or equipment.
Yes,
for sure.
Money or equipment. Yeah. Speaking of equipment, Tosh, you had a hefty little bill, I hear.
Yeah. You know what? I mean, hockey is a physical sport, and as you grow, sometimes you need new skates and you need new shin guards and you need new sticks. And those types of things happen over the last 3 weeks for me. So
yes,
yeah, it's
right.
It's a little bit of hit in the pocketbook, but you know what? It's better to be safe than using bad equipment. So
no, absolutely. And us dads, we're only good for writing checks and filling gas tanks.
There you go. Exactly. Hey, I do want to go back and talk a little bit about last week's amazing. I thought it was an amazing episode with Sean Becker, and we really haven't had to do this in the podcast to correct some things that may have been said. But I did get an email from
Tosh,
Sean.
not by me.
No. I did get an email from Sean, and we did refer to the Aaron's Nordic Center as an Olympic training center, and technically it's a national training center. The Olympic people, they have their own way of doing things. So it's a national training center. I wanted to clarify that. And Sean also said that he did misquote. He used the name Stan Feldheim when actually he was talking about Thorborn Carlson in part of the interview. And I wanted to get that out there for him because he said he might catch some flack from the Nordic people as well. And we don't want that to happen. But, sometimes when you're having an interview and you're just talking and, it happens. It happens that we make some mistakes, and we just wanted to clarify those things for Sean. And don't give Sean too much flack.
No, absolutely. And some say I'm a professional mistake maker, so I definitely know the feeling. It's all good. I wanted to relay, actually, speaking of that episode, Tosh, I happens to be in I was in a class the other day and kind of minding my own business, but I heard somebody talking about cross-country skiing, and then all of a sudden they brought up this place called the Aaron's Nordic Center, and I quickly whipped my head around and I said, well, I know where that place is. I just talked to Sean, who makes the snow there. So I think we picked up another Newsa-Cast listener. We definitely picked up another Aaron's Nordic Center patron. So I thought it was a pretty good morning, and that was kind of cool. So people are definitely starting to take notice of that just absolutely incredible facility. And if you don't know what we're talking about, go check out last week's episode because it's amazing. It really, really is.
Yeah, and they had their opening weekend this weekend. What a great opening weekend. I mean, they had lots of snow made, so they opened up on Saturday. More snow overnight. Now, I don't know how this wet, sticky snow is for the trails. I guess we'd have to ask Sean. And if you see Sean out there, ask him. But, they have some snow now. They have their opening, and hopefully they can continue. I know it's going to be a little warm towards the end of the week, but we'll have to see if they continue to stay open and continue to have good snow.
Keep making those whales, right, Tosh?
Yeah, exactly. Other than that, we got the start of winter sports happening, Joe, and lots of good matchups. We'll be getting into that throughout the year, throughout the winter season. Hockey, basketball, wrestling, you name it. There's lots of things going on right now that make the winter go by for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. We're transitioning now into full basketball. Both girls and boys are playing. I mean, your boys, hockey's in full swing. So wrestling starting up here. So we've got all the winter sports are going. We'll continue to talk about it. We're going to try to get some basketball on here a little bit, get some hockey guys, bring in some bowling, bring in all the sports and start talking about a lot of that. See if we can get a couple of athletes on here maybe as well. And just keep pumping up youth sports, right, Tosh? High school sports. Just
absolutely.
Keep pumping up the area. So
all good. And we hope you enjoy this episode and continue to enjoy the episodes by tuning into wherever you get your podcasts, and go back and look at some old ones. If this is your first time tuning in, you can find us on YouTube. Just hit subscribe.
Yes.
And enjoy the journey.
Enjoy the journey.
All right, Newsa-Cast listeners, it's time for that look in history. That look in history where we take a look at the nation, Northeast Wisconsin, could be the world. Sometimes it's sports, sometimes it's local history itself. So the old look at new. So what are you looking at today, Joe?
Well, Tosh, on the night that you and I are recording this, we had a little bit of snow here in Appleton, a couple of inches, and reminded us that winter's on its way. But if we go back to 1985, December 1st, 1985, in fact, we had a heck of a lot more snow than we had today. We had about 1.5 feet, and the Green Bay Packers were playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on that fine Sunday afternoon on December 1st, 1985, and boy, there weren't many people in Lambeau, Tosh. There was under 20,000. There was 19,856
Wow.
to be exact. And I remember I was 15 years old, and I remember my dad trying to call every bar, restaurant in the area to see if a bus would get us up to Lambeau Field, and you could not travel that day. But I tell you what was traveling were the Packers running backs. Eddie Lee Ivory, Gary Ellis, each ran for 100 yards. Plus, Lynn Dickey, 22 of 36, almost 300 yards in the snow. I mean, are you kidding me? In a driving snowstorm? But yeah, there was a Lambeau Field Snow Bowl, December 1st, 1985 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. 1985, Tosh.
Yeah, the true frozen tundra.
That was the frozen and snow-covered tundra of Lambeau Field. How about you, Tosh? What's new in your neck of the woods?
So I'm going national this week, and I'm going to go back to December 7th, 1937, and a 19-year-old baseball player, fresh out, 19 years old, young guy. His contract was bought by the Boston Red Sox, and that's one and only Ted Williams.
Yes.
One of the greatest hitters to ever play the game.
Boy.
Sweet swing, played his entire career with the Red Sox. Man, he could hit. There is no doubt about that.
Yeah, he really could. I mean, he was a little bit before our time, but we've seen a heck of a lot of video of him, and his stroke was so smooth, so level. I don't think that guy ever even swung a degree up. It was just perfectly straight every single time. And yeah, he was one of the all-time greatest. I mean, I remember when they retired his number and brought him back to Fenway Park and the
absolutely
the ride around the warning track. It was the heck. It brought tears to my eyes.
Yeah, he was something else. I mean, being a baseball guy, looking back at just one of the greats. Absolutely,
one of the all-time greats, Tosh, and maybe he'll make a comeback. I think, isn't he frozen somewhere in California?
Yeah, there was something with that, right? Yeah, he'll be in the draft soon.
That's right. Well, that's a good one, Tosh. I love the old look at new. All right, Newsa-Cast listeners, we have a special treat. We get to sit down and talk with a radio personality, the public address announcer of the Timber Rattlers, just an all-around voice guy, Joey D. I don't know if I've ever learned really, where were you from? Where did you grow up?
Originally from southwestern Indiana, a little town called Huntingburg, Indiana. The only Huntingburg in the world. And but it's real famous for a couple of movies being filmed there, including when people ask me, well, what's your favorite movie? It's called A League of Their Own. You ever heard of it?
I've heard of it.
Yep.
Loved it. Madonna.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. If you pause it at the right time, I take up the whole right side of the screen. It's pretty
really
cool. I was an extra. Yeah.
And what scene?
After one of the games, about halfway through the movie, the two owners are talking about shutting the league down, and Penny Marshall just said they picked just a random amount of people out of this big crowd outside the stadium, and just said you pointed at several people, and one of them was me, and came in and said, okay, just act like you're leaving a game, and then go down the stairway and wait for me to say cut, and then come back and we'll do it again. And the one thing was, don't look towards the field. And so just, walk right by him. That's all we need you to do. And then stop and let's do it until it's satisfactory. So we did it about 20 times. And the one time where I'm walking by just real slowly and they gave you like wardrobe and stuff like that. And the one time where I go, and I looked out towards that's the one take they took.
Oh, nice.
And it was funny when the movie came out and went and saw it in a theater several times, but the first time, jam-packed theater. And I'm sitting up near the front with my dad, who also is in the movie. He's the second base umpire in the opening scene. The soft. Yeah, he's the second base umpire. But I heard people way in the back, hey, there's Joe.
It's awesome.
I was like 16, 17 years old, something like that. But that's where I'm from.
Was your dad an official in real life?
No, but he looked like one. A little bit heavier set. And he did a bunch of scenes, too, where he was the home plate umpire. And if they would have taken those, he would have got paid a lot more because it was a scene where he actually had a line. Okay. Safe. That was his line. And if you talked, you got paid a lot more, but they cut that part and he doesn't talk in the movie, but no, he was a big inspiration. Me though, he's been gone for about 10, 11 years now. But he was a big inspiration of getting me into broadcasting. Because I got my start when I was a junior in high school. He was working at a local country radio station and they needed a Sunday afternoon DJ to do the noon to 6 shift, just DJing. And they gave me a tryout and they said, okay, because my dad knew I was interested. And I still have some cassette tapes of the first time I was on the radio. And it's like, wow. And some of the things they got away with too. I record some of my friends doing like different characters, and in between songs, I would air them, and we got away with a lot of funny stuff. At least we thought it was funny. But that's how I got my start. Was in Southern Indiana. Graduated with a degree in TV and radio broadcasting at Vincennes University. It's a neat little school. It's exceptional for broadcasting. It's only a 2-year school. Took me 2.5 to get out, but that's another story. Got my degree there. Worked in Evansville, Indiana for a while in both TV and radio. I was a videographer for a little while up in Duluth, Minnesota also. Then back to Evansville, Indiana, and then here whenever I was married and I have 2 kids. They're 24 and 22 now. And they both graduated Menasha High School. Lived in Schwabenheim first, then Appleton, and then now here in Menasha for about 20 years. And started at the Catholic radio station, then moved to the Score and worked at, I've done some work for the station in Waupaca, WDUX. Did a national internet radio show for a little while in between because there were some budget cutbacks. It's what they call a boomerang in the business where, they cut you, but they keep you in mind and they'll bring you back. And so just doing play-by-play now and color commentary, but I've done shows there. I've filled in on WHBY also doing local talk shows and stuff like that. But my main gig for the last several years have been, because I have a couple other jobs on the side, like Buffalo Wild Wings. I do a lot of PA stuff. Of course, I do the Timber Rattlers and stuff for Menasha High School. And so I got a couple other little gigs. I'm a full-time part-timer is the way that I like to put it. But the being on the radio and being behind a mic, I mean, that's what I live for. I think that's what God put me here to do, and I love every second of it. So it's kind of a little background of me. And here I am.
Being behind the mic is a passion. Has sports always been that passion?
Oh,
or
goodness.
Did you have some interest before that?
No. My story is I knew I wanted to do something with my voice and something with sports. When I first learned to read, I would take the local newspaper into the corner just by myself. I'd open it up to the sports section and act like I was on the radio, start reading the articles like I was on the radio. And if I would have to use the restroom or something, I'd say, and we'll be back right after this. So I'd close it up, use the restroom, I'd come back and open it back up. And we're back and start reading again. And so I knew from there. And then when I was in Little League, we had 2 games twice a week. And if you showed up early and you didn't play in the first game, or if you played in the second game, they needed people to keep the scorebook and they needed people to do the announcing up in the little booth there. And every time I'd get there as early as I could and tell the groundskeeper, because they'd give you first choice. And I would always say, do you have an announcer yet? And so I announced Little League Baseball is where I really got my start. And so I was 8 years old probably is when. And so, yes, I've always had a passion for sports. I picked my teams whenever I was little, and I'm all over the map. I'm a Chiefs fan in football, Spurs in basketball, Reds in baseball, Blues in hockey. I like NASCAR, any kind of racing. So I've always had a passion for sports since I was a little kid.
Joey, you touched on it just briefly, but I mean, you definitely have a unique voice. I think a one-of-a-kind voice. When did you discover that? Like, how old were you? I mean, you're doing PA announcing as a little leaguer, so you probably realize at that time that you have something there. But when did you really discover your voice and understand that you have a unique gift?
That is when I really realized it was when my mom worked for. She was an editor for Catholic magazine, and they had a little radio station on the campus of St. Meinrad is the little town, and it's got a college, and they wanted me to do one of those voice on tape, at the time cassette tapes, voice on tape reading a children's book in an 8-9-year-old's voice. And so that was the first time I remember. It's like, okay, maybe I can do something with this. And then just taking tapes in the corner again with my brothers, and we would act like we were DJs. And so I was WJOE, and my brother's name was John Newman. He was WJON. So we'd take turns and just play basketball on our little Nerf hoop while we're listening to our cassette tapes and run back over and act like we were on. And then also I remember calling into one of the local music stations, whom I went on to work for later on, because we had 2 stations in the county. And the other one had an all request Thursday where the DJ would take calls and record you requesting a song, and then play them all back like at the same time, like 2-3 times an hour. And so I would call in multiple times an hour and request songs just to kind of to be on the radio requesting a song, even if it was just, requesting, I don't know, the Jackson 5 or something like that, whatever the early 80s, sure. Late 70s.
Did you have like influences, people you were listening to on the radio, maybe play-by-play guys, maybe just music that was influence you, and maybe were you then consciously honing your voice to match something or find something?
My dad was a big influence because he was on the radio, and he was a local sports writer for the local newspaper, once a week newspaper. I really looked up to him. He took me to a bunch of things. I remember he used to get me press passes, as a 10, 12-year-old, to like state championships. And so I would be courtside for Indiana high school basketball state championships. Wow. And this was back when it was at the Hoosier Dome. Yeah. And they would get, when was back in the Damon Bailey era for Indiana University basketball, but when he was in high school, and Glenn Robinson, Alan Henderson, saw those guys face off against each other in a state championship game courtside with my dad. And of course, we'd always record it back at home, and you could see us on television every time that the camera panned. But so my dad was a big influence. Professionally wise, I guess Marty Brenneman doing Cincinnati Red stuff. I mean, we would sit by the radio and have some cheese and crackers and just listen to Reds baseball growing up. I'd go to sleep listening to Blues hockey. Hockey is really difficult on the radio, and so I kind of learned how to do play-by-play of a very difficult thing, and NASCAR as well, because, I mean, it is just a constant. So I'd say growing up, probably Marty Brenneman, Bob Costas on television, and he's still going. And then nowadays, just listening to other talk shows that I kind of tab my interviews. I love doing interviews with coaches and players and stuff like that. When I'm doing a formal interview, I do like a Jim Rome. I like his interview style that he does. Not everybody likes Jim Rome and some of the other stuff, but his interviewing is just absolutely phenomenal. And so just along the way, just listening to others and on television and, critiquing in my own little way. I think I'm my worst critic because I'll listen back to some of mine too. And I'm like, man, or like right after a game, be like, man, why didn't I say this or this? So I'm my toughest critic, but listening to yourself does help in the broadcast business. But yeah, just along the way, a bunch of different guys and ladies, sideline reporters and stuff like that, just getting different styles and at every chance. I mean, because you can always get better at whatever you do, but especially in the broadcast business.
Do you like listening to yourself? Do you listen back to yourself? Do you like listening back to yourself? Does it take a while to get comfortable with that?
Not my favorite thing to do. But yeah, like I said, sometimes you just have to and listening to what others have to say, because it hasn't always been positive, and being able to take the criticism, whether it's good or bad. So it's not my favorite thing to do, but I love doing commercials, and I'll hear myself and I'll have people say, like, I mean, just the other day, they're like, did you just do a commercial for a car wash? I said, yeah, I remember doing that one. And they're like, man, that was really good. I said, did you go to the car wash? Because then it works. Right. But so it's kind of cool to hear yourself, and even on the promos, as we call them in the business, where they'll play clips of highlights of games that I've done. That's pretty cool. That was actually a pretty good call. And so, but you have to, you because you're going to hear yourself and just kind of try and get better.
It's interesting you talk about, radio and baseball. I grew up listening to radio and baseball. I mean, I think it comes hand in hand. That's the only way I could listen to the Brewers growing up, because TV was dominated by the Cubs and Atlanta on TBS. So, you listen to Harry Carey and Stone, or you listen to Euchre on the radio, and that's, Brewers are my team, so I listen to the Brewers.
And just being the eyes of the community. Because I mean, they're not there. Just like you were talking about, just bringing you there, not just what's going on on the field, on the court, on the baseball diamond, whatever that it might be. Being there and bringing them as much as you can, doing surroundings, saying the weather, how many people are there, joking with a guy before the game and he said this and this, and then get back to the action. Mean, Euchre's really good at that. He'll be telling the story, but yet doing play by play at the same time. He'll joke around a lot. Yep. And of course, it depends on if I have a color guy. Because you can kind of banter with them too and make it a little more interesting and lean on them to say stuff that you may not have seen, or while you're writing down the score or what happened, they can be talking. So doing a game solo is a little more difficult depending on which sports, but just bringing people to the action. I get a thrill out of that too. And then having people tell me, man, like the softball run that Kakana is on, just absolutely great. There's a lot of people. I mean, they got to work because a lot of the games are during the daytime. And, we'll say, well, I was at the factory. We had the game on. Well, that's really cool. Makes me a little more nervous. I get nervous even after 30 years of doing this. I still do get I texted my girlfriend right before I started this, said, "Why am I so nervous?" And she said, "Because you always are. Do it, and you know you're going to do fine. Just do it." So I still get nervous though every time I flip on a microphone.
It amazes me how you and people who announce games can do that. The good people can bring, like, you're right inside the court, you're right inside the field, and to be able to do that is a skill I definitely do not have. I mean, but it amazes me. And the question is then, how did you develop that? I mean, is this something that you practice or is it just, did it kind of come natural to you?
It definitely takes practice over time. Doing the real thing really helps. But also, I guess I haven't done it I'll still do it just watching a game, just sit there and kind of act like I'm doing it. But I did that all the time before I actually started doing just play-by-play full time. And of course, I mean, one of my first recollections of doing it actually was for real was on the country station that I talked about that I got my start at. I also worked there while I was at college. It was about an hour away, so I'd go back and forth. But doing a high school basketball game one time, one of my first ones, was they put me on, it was Bar Reeve High School. I still remember it, the Vikings. And it was in Amish country in southern Indiana. And I'm not kidding you, the entire starting five and some of the bench, all the last name, I think it was Nepp. It was either Nepp or Graber. And the entire starting five, I'm being thrown into this. I'm like, Nepp to Nepp, bounce pass underneath the Nepp, and he scores. So, sometimes just being thrown into a situation like that, and then you just kind of, it just, to me personally, it just kind of comes to me. Biggest part about my job, though, is not actually doing what I just talked about. They're doing the games themselves. They're not easy, but the preparation. Yeah. Like this Friday, for instance, I have Kimberly and Nina in level 3 of the football, and I'm already starting my prep for that. And sure. I'm shooting out emails to the coaches to see what time I can get them to record pregame interviews, okay. Looking at all the stats, getting my little score sheet ready, talking with whoever I'm going to be doing the game with, because football, we always have somebody with us. But the preparation for an event, no matter what sport, I've done, I've called 7 or 8 different sports for state championships, from girls hockey, boys hockey, it's kind of softball, baseball, boys basketball, girls basketball. I did volleyball, state volleyball a time or two for a couple different radio stations. So I've done so many, but whatever it is, it's the preparation for it.
Sure.
And I don't always use this. No matter what you're doing, whether it's a talk show or doing a game or whatever, if you have stuff that you didn't say, it's like, man, I didn't use that, but that means you were prepped, and that's a good thing that you didn't get to everything. You don't run out of things to say and start sounding like a bumbling idiot or don't know what you're talking about. So preparation for the games really, really is a key to this profession.
So when you talk about sports, what is your favorite sport to do?
Over the years, probably, I really like doing softball. There's something about softball, okay. The pace of it. Softball and baseball are very fun, but being from Southern Indiana, basketball is my first love. Yep. And maybe it's because there's so many games, so many more games, and I enjoy getting out and being there in the pace, the tempo. Some games can last a long time, but most games, about how long they're going to last and stuff like that. So probably softball, though, for some reason. Most difficult so far, hockey, volleyball was a tough one, but the tougher ones are the more fun ones because you're learning so much and because the action is so,
Right.
I mean, I'm constantly looking. I mean, every 30 seconds, there's new people out there on the ice and you're trying to follow all the action and do the scoring. A lot of times, even at football, especially because of the crowd, around a tackle, you tell who might have the football, but as far as who's making the tackle and stuff, might have to wait for the PA guy to help out a lot of times. But I love doing softball and baseball, and I love doing them all. So it's kind of like the old saying, trying to pick out a favorite kid, because doing this really is. I mean, it's another kid of mine, so to speak.
Both my boys play hockey. I don't know how you announce hockey. That is play-by-play for hockey's got to be tough. I mean, they're talking 30, 45-second shifts coming on and off the ice, and all the hits, the action.
Yep.
That's got to be tough.
It is. It's been a couple years since I've done a hockey game, but and I remember the first time I was asked to do it, and I'm like, oh yeah, sure. I lived in Minnesota. I can do hockey. Never doing a hockey game before, but I wanted that challenge and I wanted to do it, and didn't want to let anybody down, of course, also, and so did it. And at the end of it, it's like, whew. At the end of it, it's like, man, good, it's over. But at the end of it, you also smile real big because just did it, and that I want to do it again.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Joey, now that lacrosse is a WIAA sport, I think you need to add that to your resume.
No, that would involve a lot of research and a lot of YouTube watching nowadays. Now at least you got that. You can just punch in something and listen to how the broadcasters are calling, getting the lingo, getting the rules. I would be totally up for that. That's one sport I've never done is lacrosse. I would love to do that. That'd be fun.
There's some good high school lacrosse in the area, right in the backyard.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's all about sponsorship nowadays, so we can get some sponsors.
Oh, exactly.
Dial us up, man. I would love to try that. That'd be great.
Yeah, the world definitely revolves around the sponsors, don't they? There's a state champion in northeastern Wisconsin every year in almost every single sport. It's incredible the talent that's up here, and you're calling those games with excitement, great production. I mean, it's a real service, I think, to the community. And it's a much needed niche, I think. That's
one of the funner, if that's a word. Well, it is now.
I like
that's
it.
One of the funner things. The funner things to do also is watching these kids at the high school level, and then also doing the Timber Rattlers, watching the opponents that come in as well, and watching their rise, and watching television. I'm sure there's a couple guys playing in the World Series that have come through Appleton and that I have announced. I mean, I've announced MVPs that have gone through. Mike Trout somehow, some way was at the single A level. Joey Votto, another MVP that I've gotten to announce the opponents and then just watch their rise. And I mean, a guy like Tyrese Halliburton, who was just at Oshkosh not too long ago, and here he is now. He just signed that big old deal in the offseason. I'm like,
right.
It was just a couple of years ago, I was announcing him on the radio here, and now there he is, just watching them rise. The talent here in Northeast Wisconsin, that's a great point. I mean, it's awesome. In every single sport, we are represented really well. I think there might have been a year. It was recently and it was weird to not have someone at state. I forget which sport it was, but it's like, okay, season is officially over here for Northeast Wisconsin. But that's very, very rare. So it's really neat to do what I do in this location. I'm extremely blessed, and I love every second of it.
So how long have you been doing play-by-play for the Timber Rattlers?
Well, I would love to do play-by-play.
Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm just the PA guy.
PA guy, yeah.
Chris does a great job on the radio for them doing play-by-play, but just doing the PA. My first year was 2005, so yeah, do the math there. There was one year where I didn't do all the games, but
Okay.
and I still don't do every single game. But yeah, for a majority of every single year since 2005.
Wow.
And yeah, when I got that gig, I'm like, wow, it's pretty cool. And it was a friend of mine at the radio station that saw the ad that they needed somebody. And
Okay.
that's another thing too in this business. Make connections, and don't burn any bridges. And, because everybody knows everybody. And one thing led to another. They gave me a tryout, and off and running. And that's, yeah, I get asked about the Tim Brothers probably most often than anything else. That people will know me from being that voice, and
Sure.
say they were at games and stuff. Well, come on and say hi. Well, you looked a little busy and all that kind of stuff. Like, well, did you have fun? And start asking them about their experiences, whether it be that or at any sporting event. Just talking with people and how much they love getting out about and watching what goes on here in Northeast Wisconsin. It's spectacular.
What is a tryout like for a PA announcer? What was that process?
The owner, Rob, and one other person, Nikki, they were sitting in the stands, so empty stands, and they had me come in and do starting lineups, and so got through the starting lineups, and then acted like I was announcing, the batters that were coming up, and so then I got a call back after that to come in and do an actual game, because it was near the start of the season, and so after the first game or two, they offered me the gig, and so it was a little nerve-wracking, and I know there were other people that tried out, and to get that, I mean, truly is an honor, and to represent that organization and the community. But it was interesting. Let's put it that way.
So that booth that you're in, I mean, you're a conductor. It's, I mean, that's going to be somewhat of an intense night, isn't it? Being, it's
for the T-Rats?
Just being the night of being the PA announcer, that whole production for you has got to be pretty wild, right? Take us through a night of that.
Well, because it's not just me. I mean, I'm just the guy, I'm just the announcer,
right.
Just the announcer. I do help out doing some of the other things, but we've got several camera people, guys and girls that come in just as game day operations. I'm one of the game day operations people. But there's 2 or 3 full-timers that are in there that run, school board and everything's in a different booth. We run. So there's me, there's the sound guy. Anytime you hear a sound effect or the walk-up songs and stuff like that, there's somebody there. Sometimes I'll help out doing that if we're shorthanded. There's someone who runs the big video board that'll be there to run either the funny videos or the commercials in between innings. That's where the real stuff happens, is in between innings, because either I'm calling something that's on the field or I'm throwing it down to somebody who has a microphone doing something in the crowd. So we line up everything, what we're going to be doing in between innings. So we all meet beforehand, make sure everybody is cool and where they're going, what spot they're going to have for those guys. Then there's because everything is on video stream now or on television. So we have a director who's looking at a television with all the camera shots and calling out what camera we're going to use, ready camera 1, take camera 1. And he's looking at he or she is looking at everything. We have if we're showing a slow motion replay, all the replay that's done off to the side a little bit. So at any given point, we've got, 6, 7, 8 people that are in the booth at the same time at a Timber Rattlers game, and then another 4 or 5 people out and about doing cameras and the promotional crew with the microphones and stuff. So it really is. It's quite a production. It's not just showing up and doing the thing, whether it's doing PA or doing play-by-play for a local event. Some people think I just show up and turn on the microphone. That is not the case. The job it's fun, but it is challenging. It is not an easy thing to do, whether it be PA or being on the radio, whether it's a regular radio shift or doing play-by-play or color commentary, you don't just show up. That's for sure. That goes back to the preparation part.
Yeah.
On game days out at the stadium for baseball, it is quite a production, and that's just us. I mean, there's a ton of other people that work out there.
Right.
I mean, as you know, and been to games and stuff like that. There's from the concessions to the ticket takers to the ushers there's so many people involved in a game day thing, and we're there for the community and the fans. Baseball games kind of just like, oh, yeah, there is a game going on, isn't there?
We talked a few weeks back to Charlie, the executive chef out at the ballpark, and he walked us through the food, and it's really interesting what you walking us through the PA and that video production side. The pronunciation of names. I mean, baseball names are like no other. How do you not screw that up? What's your cheat code for it? How are you practicing? Obviously,
PA is a little easier because you'll get there and see the lineups first of all, and make sure those are the main people that you want to get right is the starters. And you'll talk with, for me, for the Timber Rattlers, usually I'll go into the visiting radio booth and, chit chat with them about their job and stuff like that, but get the pronunciations, and, talk about how their season's gone and everything, but that doesn't really matter as far as the PA part of it. But pronunciations are huge. And as far as baseball goes, then it's the same for a whole series. So that makes it a little bit easier. But first game of a series, I always get there even earlier to do stuff like that and get to know the other team just a little bit better. But especially some of the tough ones. And trust me, you get to know when you do say a name wrong, especially at a local high school event. You'll have parents that'll come up who are listening there, or friends and family if the parents don't want to actually do it themselves. But you'll know. And I've even had we even had a parent or two call when I'm doing a Timber Rattlers game for an opposing team, who will be watching on the video stream. And the next day, I'll hear about it. I'm like, well, that's what I was told. And so I can only go by what I'm told. But when there is difficult names, I will specifically, and when I go down and talk with the officials and everything, that's another fun part too, Mr. Joe, is talking with the officials beforehand too, and making sure I'm saying their names right too. And then I always make sure that I say, I only want to be saying your name one time, okay? But how do you say it? Because you want to say it right. But when I'm doing that, it's phonetically. There's another big word for me. Yeah. Phonetically, I'll write it how I am going to say it, and they'll watch me writing it down and say, no, it's R-O-E. I'm like, no, I want to put it how it's said. Yeah. Is it Schrader or is it Schroeder? And I'll put S-H-R-A-Y if it's Schrader, or S-H-R-O-W if it's Schroeder. That's just one example. But writing it down phonetically, and we had a tough one when I still don't know if I was saying it right last week for Stevens Point against Kimberly, that the starting quarterback, because you're saying it the most of anybody. And so I wanted to say it right. If you don't know how to say one, you just kind of say it real quick. Or if you don't know what happened, just say it real quick and say it kind of like it sounds. Most people listening or watching will know. But if you don't know right away, just say it real quick.
You said it right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the venues and some of the stadiums, and especially in the Fox Valley, they're just incredible. The buzz. I mean, you do PA. You mentioned about Nashua once in a while. I mean, Calder Field is one of the greatest high school fields there is. Mm-hmm. I mean, I love officiating games on Friday nights. Just simply being in the stadium and just feeling that buzz. It's just infectious.
The atmosphere is awesome. I mean, you hear the band, you smell the food. Depending on the weather, I guess. Sometimes it can be a little chilly. Sometimes it can be a little wet. Sometimes thunder and lightning, you got to stop a game, stuff like that. Everything. Well, yeah. There's the venues are, and there's new ones popping up all the time. Nina's got a brand new one this year that is state of the art. They'll I would be surprised if they're not a neutral site type of place for next week. For level 4, but the venues it's very special. We're spoiled as far as that aspect of it. The venues go, but Friday nights here, it's just awesome.
Absolutely.
I would expect that doing a Friday night game in a city like Menasha, the whole town comes out. I mean, it's a smaller city here tucked into the Fox Valley, but it's a huge stadium. That's got to just be a blast.
Yeah.
The excitement's got to be incredible.
And we had a renovation here a couple of years ago that turned it into the turf that it is now. And the stadium this year, they got a new press box on the other side. That was much needed for many years, especially this time of year when they're getting more and more media attention. And in the past, it's like, well, where we go? Well, we can put a little table up outside here for you. Really? But now they have that new one on the other side. But I mean, you're right. Everybody comes out, and they're lined on the outside of the fence to catch a glimpse of it too, if they're not actually in the stadium itself. And they travel well too. I mean, even the opposing teams come from, especially this time of year, miles and miles around to come and support their team. And they're there game after game, depending on what else is going on, of course. And the weather does have something to do with that too. But the response from all the communities here, it's so much fun to get out and be a part of it.
I love that at Calder. You mentioned that there's always fans on the sidewalk, isn't there, in that northeast end zone on lawn chairs watching through the fence?
Yeah. Yep. They'll pull up in their cars, and if I'm doing it on the radio, that they'll flip on the radio and listen, or just open up their windows and kind of be a part of the action there, or get out and watch it for a little while, and bring their blankets and lawn chairs, like you said, and just watch. They can't see the scoreboard from one of the sides, and so that makes your job even a little bit more important to actually say what's going on the field, whether you're doing PA or doing the radio part of it, because there's some people that are even there that don't know what's going on. And so you got to be the guy that's telling them what is going on, and that's definitely a rush.
I'd be curious on your take on this. I've had conversations through this football season with officials, and Tosh and I have talked about it. Maybe we've talked to just some other people interested in high school sports. And does it seem to you like just like the level of play is down, and a lot of people seem to attribute it to COVID, that the seniors are now the kids that have gone through COVID, maybe some kids have dropped out of sports. I mean, what's your assessment of just the overall play of, and maybe I'm just hyper focused on football a little bit this time of year. I haven't seen all the sports obviously play out, but my assessment, it feels like just the overall play is just not what it once was. It's still good, but it just feels like it's a notch down. And I don't know, I'd be curious on your take.
No matter what school you're at, I mean, you're going to go through cycles as far as the talent and, let's face it, coaching staffs. And I mean, that changes often too. And depends on the philosophies, the coaches themselves. And some kids, I mean, let's face it, some kids just, I mean, they want to play, but if they're not playing for so long or whatever, they may not want to play such and such. But if you can get them going early, that's a big thing too, and that's what I love hearing whenever I'm talking about the coaches of the successful schools. They always talk about, start them as young as you can. Football, obviously, you can't start as young, but get them going, get that interest going, build up the camaraderie, get a love for the game. This year though, yeah, I guess now that you say it, it may not seem like it on paper, and sometimes even on the field, but there's still that love for it. But talent wise, maybe not as many guys and girls going on to the next level this year. There still are some, but that's a good point. Now that you pointed out, it's not as it has been in recent. I don't know how much would be due to COVID though. That's a really good point. That's something to think about.
One sport that we didn't cover, and I don't know it real well, but I know you have a passion for it, and that's NASCAR. Mm-hmm. Is that something you developed growing up? I mean, that's NASCAR country, kind of.
It's definitely racing Indiana country. Be it IndyCar. I remember my first IndyCar experience was 1982. Yeah. I was 6.5 back then, and my dad took me to the Indy 500 for the first time, and I think that's where I first started. My love for racing was 80s IndyCar was really something. NASCAR, a little bit further on in my life, but I've done NASCAR shows and stuff like that, and I still follow it even the littler ones, the Truck Series and the Xfinity Series, the little bit lower levels. I'll still stop and watch parts of a race on a Friday night or a Saturday afternoon. My guy, I'm a Denny Hamlin. Started out as a Jeff Burton fan, and then he retired, so I had to pick somebody else. And again, just picking someone and following it. And I picked Denny Hamlin, and he just missed out this past weekend. That was a bit depressing watching that race and just knowing, he's got to just get a couple more points. He missed out on making the championship 4, as they call it now. It's so tough to follow though, because all the changes that they make every single year, be it the car or the rules or the points or whatever. NASCAR is, it's kind of more difficult racing in general is kind of harder to follow. But once you get into it, and once you actually go to a race and start following somebody, like this past Sunday, I had my computer set up and I subscribed to where you can listen to the scanner of any of the drivers. So you can listen to a specific driver. If a wreck happens or whatever, flip it over to that number and listen to what they're saying and the crews and stuff like that. So that really kind of brings you to the action as well. And then all of a sudden you see it on TV, or if you're at the actual event, going to a race, no matter what level, even around here, we got some really good racing out of WIR. Yeah. Any kind of racing, just the thrill of actually being there. It's not just turning left, people. It's not. There's a lot more. It is. And I remember me and Sparks got into this in the early days of Shane Sparks on whenever I did have the Daily Show. And he just absolutely hated NASCAR at the time. And we got into it because when you really think about it, it arguably is the most team sport when you think about it. I mean, there's people working on these cars, be it the lug nuts. I mean, they build these cars from scratch. There's people, if they're this much off, you get penalized, or it could mean the difference in winning and losing, and it's not just going left. I don't hate, but it just like people who think it's just driving fast and going left. Yes, there are some tracks that's what you do. But there's so many people involved in making, no matter what it is, whether it's a local level or at NASCAR or IndyCar or whatever in racing, that make it happen actually on the day of the event, just leading up to it. I know you can say that about every sport, but man, I tell you about racing. When it comes to having a vehicle out there, it's got to be perfect on the day of an event. And it really is a team sport when you really think about it. But it's so fun to watch, whether it's on television or especially in person. I love racing.
I have such great memories of the Indianapolis 500 back in probably the 70s and 80s on the radio. For whatever reason, that must have been the day that we went to visit my grandpa. It was an hour and a half away. And I remember that in the car listening to the greatest spectacle in racing. And I don't know who the guy was, but talk about some of the all-time great announcing, just that event and whoever that announcing team was. You were at the Indianapolis 500. It was incredible.
Yes, they go to the commercial break every time. Still to this day, you're listening to the greatest spectacle in racing. And that's the cue for the people back in the studio to hit the commercial. Is the greatest spectacle in racing, and part of that is the race itself. This past year was just, oh my goodness, and I was there for this one. I go when I can still, and it went into overtime, and the pass on the final lap in overtime, and it happened right in front of where we were sitting, and the place is going nuts, and we're talking 200,000 people at this event just going and seeing the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, whether it be for the Brickyard or for the Indy 500 or whatever event that they have there. This place is a spectacle. They are absolutely right. And one of the biggest thrills to this date for me in sports, one of the neatest things to see, if they do it right, if all the cars do it right, and there's been some starts to the race that has been a little screwed up. They've even had to restart them. Lining these cars up 3 wide, 11 deep, because there's always 33 cars that start the Indianapolis 500. They start of the Indy 500. They go screaming down that front straightaway at over 200 miles an hour. All of these cars side by side, inches apart, and they got to get into that turn one. You can't go 3 wide into that first turn. So everybody is jockeying for position, and that first lap of the Indy 500 is, to me, one of the best things, especially in person, but even on television. And if the drivers do it right, it is the greatest spectacle in racing. And on the radio side of it, yeah, they bring you right to it. And every corner they got people down in the pits if there's any kind of pit stop or whatever, people behind the scenes doing the feature stories on the guys and the ladies that race. Radio broadcast of any race at whatever level I can't imagine that is I would love to be a racing announcer. That would take a lot of, and I've tried it myself, going to a track with just a little tape recorder, and it is tough. But they make it sound so easy. Radio broadcasting during a race, man, it's got to be really, really tough, but a lot of fun too. They make it sound so much fun.
Oh, they really do. They are just, they're so good. Those guys, and I found too the golf announcers, like in the Sirius Golf Channel or whatever, those guys are equally as good too. Where you have so much air that you have to fill, and so much just time to fill, but they just do it effortlessly. And it's like we say, if you can put the listener in that venue, in that race, man, you're doing your job. On the golf side of thing,
and being a former, with the experience of being a camera guy too on site, being a camera guy at a golf, because whoever follows that ball, man, I can't imagine how much they get paid. They gotta, and how much experience you have to be able to right off the tee, boom, you gotta be, your camera's gotta be right there. And again, going back to any sport, I guess, when you think about it, the people behind the scenes, the camera people that actually bring it to you as well. Not just the in front of the mic people, but the production side of things for any sport. But golf, yeah, that's another sport I've never announced that I'm sure that I could. And they don't always just whisper like that, but I'm sure that's part of it. That'd be fun too, because a lot of them walk around and they're right there. They're right in on the action. That's part of the thrill of being a broadcaster too. You're there, especially during the exciting parts of sport. There's sometimes where you got to find ways to fill, but the exciting parts and knowing when to get excited yourself and knowing when to hush and just let what's happening happen and then come in and say, because I've had that several times too. Last second shot a couple of years ago for Oshkosh Lords to win the state championship in basketball. And I remember just calling it and then hushing for about 15 seconds and letting because you could tell what was going on and then describe what's going on, but being in the heat of the moment like that. and then the filler time. So it is a challenge, but it is so much fun.
Yeah. Do you have a preference I know Eric kind of asked a similar question on your favorite sport, but do you like doing the morning radio? Do you like doing play-by-play? Do you like doing the PA? I mean, I know you like doing it all. Maybe in a perfect world, that is the perfect, just mix it all together. But do you have a preference on what you really, really get jacked up to do more than
that is
the other?
A very fun part about what I do in my particular situation is I do get a little bit of everything. And some are a little easier. I know I've said that it's not easy, but the PA is a little easier because you don't have to do as much of the research and the prep. But play-by-play for me, that is definitely my love. But man, that's a tough choice. But I would say play-by-play, being there and the prep for it, and then the actual events, and being able to because, like I said, PA is awesome, but there's only so much that you can put into it as far as personally. Like you can, for example, the Timber Rattlers, I'll put more emphasis, more excitement into when we're up to bat and in between innings during the stuff that goes on. And then when the other team comes up, just kind of say their names. Just say, now batting.
That's awesome. I mean, that's so, yeah.
But when you're play-by-play, you're just putting your fully into it, and you can, and depending on what level, it's not easy, the bias part of it, because you got to be as unbiased as you can. But there's also times when sorry, Joe, when there's a call or two that maybe an umpire, a ref, or somebody, you got to kind of say something without actually saying something. So that can get kind of tough.
Damn, ref screwed us again.
Exactly. That's what you want to say. You want to drop a few more things, but
go ahead and say it.
You got to be as unbiased as you can. But then you get to a level where, like next week, if we're just following one of the local teams that are playing somebody that's far away, you can be a little bit more biased, and that makes it a little more fun. But the biased aspect of it, you got to kind of watch yourself. You got to watch yourself, because you'll definitely get critiqued, and you'll hear about it too if you say something that is a little bit too overly into it. But it's something else to try and hold yourself back sometimes.
You're human after all, right?
Exactly.
Filled with emotion.
Yeah. And you have to be. I mean, it's sport. It's emotional one way or another.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing your story. Totally appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, man. You first
like
asked me, I'm like, wait a minute, me?
You're always intriguing and interesting. It's really awesome to just get to know you, what you like, where you came from.
Honestly, I really feel honored to be able to be here and share my story. And
we appreciate it. I mean, honestly, it's an honor for us, because it's I've no lie, I've listened to you since day one. So it's Jim Caston. Jim was a good buddy of mine.
He was a big influence around here for me. I learned a lot from Jim. When I went to games down in Madison, he would show me, okay, you got to go here, you got to do this. Here's who you're going to be talking to, make sure you get a good relationship with this person, do this and this. Jim taught me a lot, and not just him. I mean, I've been very fortunate to work with some very influential and I've learned a lot from people along the way, and you have to. And I've been very fortunate.
Well, folks, it's Red Smith Banquet Throwback time, where we go back and take a look at who has graced our presence at the Red Smith Banquet through the years. And Tosh, this year, or this episode, we're going to go back to 2011 and a name that we're all familiar with, I think, Mr. Greg Gumbel.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, the Gumbel name has been in, whether it's announcing on TV shows or sports announcing with Greg, it's when you hear Gumbel, you know what you're talking about. You know who you're talking about.
Absolutely. His brother Bryant, of course, he was, he's still around as well. He was a morning show host for a long time. And Greg now, you currently catch him on CBS Sports basketball, but we've caught a lot of years where he did football, and just one of those great classic play-by-play voices that we all love and can't imagine life without him, really.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? He actually was the first African-American announcer to call play-by-play of a major sports championship in the United States when he did the Super Bowl for CBS in 2001.
Oh, very nice. I didn't know that. Yeah. That's excellent. And we're cutting edge. We had Leslie Visser the other couple of episodes ago, right, Tosh? She was the first woman broadcaster in basketball. So we have them all here at the Red Smith Banquet.
Yeah, now he's kind of concentrating on college basketball, where you can find him on CBS doing college basketball. Actually, his contract was just renewed in March of this year.
Nice.
So tune in over the winter, and you're going to hear Greg Gumbel on CBS for sure.
Absolutely. In the meantime, sit back, enjoy, go back to the Paper Valley Hotel on a January night in 2011.
Red Smith Sports Awards. Banquet Throwback.
The Red Smith Award, of course, goes to someone who has made some unique contributions to sport in Wisconsin, and also epitomizes the great values that Red Smith exhibited.
Let's give a Red Smith welcome.
Please welcome Greg Gumbel.
Good evening, everyone. I'm so glad Jeff talked about flying. As I flew into town this afternoon, arrived at Appleton International Airport. Hey, it was a nice flight, and my luggage arrived with me. I'm a happy camper. Anybody who flies a lot will tell you that things can happen, and they do. I board my flight in Detroit, coming up here. The guy sitting across the aisle from me looks at me and he says, "Bryant Gumbel." And I said, "No." And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "No." And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "No." And he says, "You want to bet?" And I looked at him. I said, "What?" He said, "I'll bet you $100 you're Bryant Gumbel." I haven't decided yet if I'm going to cash his check or not. And then there was this time I was doing an NCAA tournament game in Tucson, Arizona. And my partner, Digger Phelps, and I, and this was back in the early 90s. And Digger Phelps and I are doing the game, and we're out on the floor, and we're rehearsing the opening to the show. And about 15 rows up, there's a guy yelling, "Bryant! Hey, Bryant!" And I ignored him. And he keeps yelling, "Hey, Bryant!" Finally, our producer says, "Okay, guys, take 5. We're going to check some things here in the truck." Everybody takes a break. I take a walk up the steps. And I walk up to this guy, and this guy says, "Hey, Bryant, I am a really big fan of yours." And I said, "Is that right?" And And he says, absolutely. He says, I watch you all the time. And I said, all the time? He goes, I never miss a show. I said, you watch the Today Show in the morning with the interviews with the politicians and the economists and the newsmakers of the day? He goes, yeah, I catch all that stuff. I said, well then, maybe you can tell me what the hell I'm doing in Tucson, doing a college basketball game, wearing a jacket with a patch that says CBS Sports. And he hesitated, but only for a second. He goes, I was going to ask you about that. So I'm very patient sometimes. And I explained to him that I'm Greg, that Bryant's my brother, and Bryant hadn't done sports for about 18, 19 years. And that I'm the one that was at ESPN and Madison Square Garden Network. When I give him the short history, he never interrupts. He never says a word. When I finish, we shake hands. I tell him to enjoy the game. I start to walk down the steps, and he yells after me, say hi to Willard for us. And I can think of no more appropriate a story to begin with than the football game that I was covering at Soldier Field in Chicago between the Bears and the Green Bay Packers. A tight defensive struggle, as games between two old rivals usually are. Goes right down to the final minutes of the game. One team fumbles deep in enemy territory. The other recovers, takes it in, only points of the day. I talked with the guy who recovered the fumble after the game. A defensive tackle, big number 79 from Chuck Berry State University or someplace like that. Here's what he said. He said, in a case like that, you got to keep your confidence, play your game. Most important, you got to stay flexual and give yourself a chance to win. I spent 3 days in the library looking for flexual. I couldn't find it. Not so long ago, during one of those horrible seasons the Detroit Lions have been having, the press was questioning one member of the team about the troubles, about the losing streak, about what the problem might be. He said, we need a coach with an imaginary mind. I'm a big music fan. I am a big rock fan. I am a true child of the 60s. You ask anyone who knows me, they will tell you I am the biggest fan of the Rolling Stones that you will ever see in your entire life. The things that I have managed to do in my career pale next to the fact that I got to meet them. I got to know them. I get to go backstage when they tour. I get to go to the parties. I get great seats at concerts. Keith Richards has been my hero for forever. I love the Rolling Stones. I was talking about music with a bunch of football players one day, and I happened to mention I'm a big Stones fan. This one guy says, yeah, me too, Fred and Wilma and Barney. When Stanley Shakespeare was playing wide receiver for the University of Miami football team, he told a crowd gathered around his locker one day, to be or not to be, I definitely is. Now, baseball players are off in their own little world, too, sometimes. I don't know why that is. They just are. One guy was standing in the outfield before a game one day, and a teammate walked by. And he said, hey, what time is it? The other guy said, you mean now? Remember kind of a strange guy used to pitch for the Detroit Tigers by the name of Mark Fidrich? The Bird, yeah. Talked to the baseball out on the mound. Mark and a teammate show up at the ballpark one day, and just as they're about to walk through the gates, Mark snaps his fingers. He said, I have to go back to the hotel. I forgot my razor. His teammate says, use my Norelco. Mark says, no thanks, I'll take a cab. One baseball team was crossing over the Canadian border one day to play against the Toronto Blue Jays. At customs, a customs official asked one of the pitchers if he had anything to declare. The pitcher said, "Yes, I am damn proud to be an American." Johnny Logan, the former shortstop for the Milwaukee Braves, was one of the great ones. He was great when he stepped onto the field to play the game. He was great when he was talking with the press after the game. This is Johnny Logan. Rome wasn't born in a day. He once received an award and then told the assembled crowd, "I will perish this trophy forever." And when Johnny Logan was asked to name the greatest baseball player of all time, he said, "I'd have to go with the immoral Babe Ruth." And then there was the former manager, Danny Ozark, whose team was in a horrible downward spiral, a terrible losing streak, and he was asked about the team morale, and he said, "At this point, morality isn't a factor." And, you know, you may sit there and laugh at this stuff and think that it's all very funny, but you've never known embarrassment until you've been in a restaurant with an athlete who ordered a giraffe of wine. I will never deny the fact that I've been very fortunate in a career that began in 1973 at WMAQ in Chicago, where I spent 7.5 years, and then came the 5.5 years at ESPN, Madison Square Garden Network in New York for 3, CBS Sports for 5, NBC Sports for 4, and then back to CBS Sports in 98. Let's forget for the moment the fact that I obviously can't hold a job. This is just a list of some of the people I have been privileged not just to have gotten to know, but to have worked with. Jim Cott and Bobby Mercer and Joe Morgan and Steve Garvey, and Joe Montana and Phil Simms and Dan Deerdorf, and Terry Bradshaw and Dan Marino and Chris Collinsworth and Mike Ditka and Joe Gibbs and Boomer Esiason and Kenny Stabler, and Quinn Buckner and Clark Kellogg and Greg Anthony and Dean Smith and Walt Frazier and Bill Walton and Magic Johnson. Some I got to know better than others, of course, and some stories will stay with me forever. When I worked in Chicago, not only did I get to know the great Chicago Bears running back Walter Payton, we became great friends, and we were friends for more than 20 years. 9 times a Pro Bowl running back, Mike Ditka once said of Walter, "He was the greatest football player I've ever seen, but he was an even greater person," and that he was. When I left Chicago to join ESPN, I'd return often because I still have family there, and I wasn't allowed to stay in a hotel. I stayed with Walter and Connie in their home, and Walter was a fun-loving, devilish prankster, joker, troublemaker. Someone gave him a brand-new Lamborghini, and one day he took me for a ride on the Illinois toll road. And at one point, I leaned over to take a peek at the speedometer, and we were going about 125 miles an hour. And I didn't want to appear to be the wimp that I am. So I said to Walter, "Aren't you concerned about the cops?" And he never took his eyes off the road. He just shook his head and said, "No, they don't have anything this fast." Sports takes a beating sometimes. And sometimes it's deserved and sometimes it isn't. But I wouldn't trade my job for any other. And as a result, it makes me a very appreciative person. I have been and continue to be one of the fortunate people who get to do what I do because I love it so much. But I hope that you guys will stop along the way, as I often do, to appreciate the other things around us in life and, frankly, the people in our lives. In the last year and a half, I've lost an ex-roommate, a couple of fraternity brothers from school, and the guy who hit cleanup behind me on our college baseball team. I lost my coach, and I lost the younger brother of a teammate who was like a little brother to me. I lost my dad 38 years ago, and I lost my mom last summer. We all lose people in our lives, and we think about them a lot. And hopefully we all appreciate those we still have with us. I know I do, and I tell them I love them every time I talk with them. I'm very thankful for them, and I'm very thankful to have been asked to be here today. I wish you all the very best. Thanks.
All right, everybody, Newsa-Cast listeners, here we go. This is our Forgotten and Never Forgetting. Say it right out of the gate. We're going to do awesome today.
You did, Tosh.
Joe. So,
kudos.
Yeah, so we're gonna look at something that we want to forget and something that we don't, essentially. So, Joe, what's your forgotten for this week?
Tosh, thank God I'm forgetting this because I had one heck of a Friday night. I tell you that. Dog farts. Oh. I tell you what, I happen to be off this weekend, Tosh, and that means I got to spend a little time with my Basset Hound Hazel, and I think we ate just a little bit too much on Thursday because something must have been upset with her because holy cow, is there anything in this world that smells worse than a dog's silent fart?
Yeah. And then when they look at you, look around, and they're like, I can't believe you just did that.
Oh, I had tears running down my face. Yes, exactly. I have nobody to blame it on, so it's But holy cow, Hazel, I was sitting outside for a little bit and no fault of my own. So I am soon to forget that until the next bomb goes off.
Nice. That's awesome.
How about you, Tosh? What are you forgetting?
Well, I'm going to go a little deep. I have been sitting and, teaching and even looking at, youth playing sports. And one of the big things is that I want to forget this idea that the journey is not important, that it's instant gratification, where the journey is more important, really, than the outcome sometimes.
Yes.
And it's the things that you learn as you're going through there. And in our society right now, I think it's all about instant gratification.
It is.
And we don't look at the entire journey. And I want to get back to that, try to teach these young kids in my classes, or, I'm not coaching really anymore, but I still talk to these kids and explain how important the practice and the journey up to the game, or, what you're going to do in your career and things like that, how important that journey really truly is in the long run.
Tosh, I could not agree with you anymore. We always, before we took the field, before every football game, we always put our hands in the middle, and our saying was enjoy the journey, because it is all about the journey. I think about the Newsa-Cast, what you and I are just doing with this. I absolutely love the journey. It's all about the journey. It's not about anything else. It's about doing it, taking it in, and enjoying it. And you're right. We look for instant gratification all the time, and it's not the same.
Yeah. Whether it's phones and the snap that comes up on your phone right away, and the kids have to look at it. Oh, what was that?
Yes.
Yeah, it's put them away, enjoy what's going on around you, think about what you're doing, and enjoy the journey to where you're going.
Yeah, that's a terrific one, Tosh, and a lesson that we all should think about. I certainly need to be reminded of that as well. I love that, Tosh. Well, that's something we're certainly forgetting that, but what is something that, Tosh, you're never going to forget?
Well, I got Ethan's birthday is coming up on the 5th. So, Melissa's brought, not that my parents and family didn't make a big deal about birthdays, but they make a big deal about birthdays.
Sure.
It's all the family getting together. It's having birthday dinners and putting up the birthday sign. So we do a lot of that around here, and that's something I don't want to forget. My kids are 18 and 14, soon to be 15, and I don't want to forget the birthdays that we've had, and hopefully that we keep this journey going, and we keep continuing to have the birthday sign out for everybody, and enjoying time with each other.
Absolutely, Tosh. We're enjoying the journey, right?
Yep, there you go. It all comes around.
That's right. That's forgotten, right? It just comes around and around.
Yeah. How about you, Joe?
Well, Tosh, I was excited. I was going to go with the fact that I finally figured out how to carry a loaf of bread on my bike without squishing it back from the grocery store, but I'm not going to go with that one. That might be a little boring, but I do want to do one shout out, and it got me to think that I'm not going to forget this, because It makes me happy, and it actually makes me excited. And I'm talking about actually the Newsa-Cast very first fan and somebody that I work with. I want to shout out Keith. I want to put him in the I'm Never Forgetting segment. Keith Burgess. He is, and Tosh, you met him. I think he's our Newsa-Cast very first fan, and he always gives me really good, constructive feedback on what we're doing, because like we say, we're not actually professionals at this. I know that's shocking to most people, but shout out to Keith that I'm never forgetting that he's a fan of the Newsa-Cast.
Fantastic. That's awesome. We like fans.
Yeah, we do. Well, that's I'm never forgetting, and I already forgot the saying, Tosh. It's forgotten and I'm never forgetting. For gosh sakes, I can never get it right.
No worries. No worries at all.
Thank you for listening to another great episode of the Newsa-Cast. We'd really appreciate it if you'd hit up our social pages, subscribe, like, follow, and don't be afraid to engage. Head over to our YouTube channel to get exclusive content like the full interviews and speeches from past Red Smith banquets. Thanks for listening to the Newsa-Cast. We really appreciate your support. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and tell a friend. A huge thank you to Digstown for all the music in today's episode. Catch a gig or find them on Spotify. Help us grow by subscribing wherever you get your pods or sharing the Newsa-Cast. Follow us on Facebook, X, TikTok, or Instagram. One of the best ways to help us grow is to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Northeastern Wisconsin Sports Advancement is a 501c3 organization. Our mission is to raise money, provide support, and bring greater awareness for youth sports organizations in Northeast Wisconsin. We do this primarily through the Red Smith Sports Award Banquet and the Newsa-Cast. Each year, we give back to the community through 3 initiatives: the Every Kid Plays Grant, the Gives Back Initiative, and scholarships to student athletes.